here.
We are talking the low-budget slasher flick, Pickaxe. This one is written and directed by Jeremy Sumrall and stars Tiffany Shepis. The movie focuses primarily on a group of kind of teens as they are off to go to a kind of rock concert in the kind of the late 80s in this kind of small American town, obviously running paths with the locals and this kind of now undead serial killer who likes to kill people using a pickaxe, among other things. Lots of boobs, lots of deaths. That's pretty much how the movie goes. Let's discuss what works, first of all, with Pickaxe. Obviously a low-budget, tongue-in-cheek affair. Obviously aiming for the kind of the B-movie schlock market, and I think fans of that genre will probably get a bit of a kick out of this one, because it definitely does, I think, deliver on what you'd probably expect. I mean, I lost count how many sets of boobs there are in this movie, so if you're definitely a boob person, then this movie is going to have something for you at the very least. There are a great many kills. As I said, mainly kind of through a kind of a pickaxe. The guy who's playing the kind of like the serial killer, the slasher, is a big guy, looks kind of threatening. And there are kind of a few variations on the kind of the deaths. The characters, I've got to say, are quite fun. They kind of played up the kind of like the 80s kind of slasher stereotypes. You know, the good kind of final girl, the nerds, the slutty one, etc. You know, they're all there. All the kind of like the archetypes are out on display this movie, and have kind of almost turned up to 11 and kind of played up to the kind of the extreme. I actually did like Tiffany Shepis' character, who has kind of PTSD from the original film and is now essentially an alcoholic and kind of can't really function properly. And I actually thought that was somewhat of a kind of a layered kind of B plot, really. That's not really explored too much, but I actually thought her scenes probably had the most pathos. If there's any pathos in this movie, it's that her along the sheriff, who I must have been also a survivor from the previous movie. I've got to say they were kind of dramatic wise, at least. Their scenes were kind of pretty good, and I think she did actually Tiffany did a good job here of doing a kind of essentially a functioning alcoholic, really. The movie is well paced. You know, it doesn't kind of shy away from lots of action. This killer's really kind of right from the opening scene is kind of there, and there's kind of quite a lot of fun. It has a sense of fun, this movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously. I mean, if you compare this, for example, to the Halloween kind of sequel, the new one, obviously that is a scary film, that is a brutal film. This movie lacks that because obviously it's taken for kind of a more of a tongue-in-cheek approach, and because it's so low budget, it doesn't kind of, have that kind of same feel, but it has more of that sort of fun, goofy kind of like slasherness. Now, that being said, obviously if that's not your kind of thing, then you may not get on with this movie. But there are some other issues here that I feel need addressing. For me, the primary issue with this film is actually its technical side, because I do feel there's some quite noticeable technical issues with this movie. In two things primarily. Firstly, the editing. The editing in this movie is so poor. I mean, there's things that transition that seem like they just cut. There's like more footage that should have been, a few seconds more footage. It looks like things were just cut too early. It kind of goes into the next kind of shot, and thinking, hang on a second, this kind of doesn't really make sense. What's going on? There's some very kind of hard edits with, like I've said, like there's scenes, it's seeming like a few seconds of transition that are missing. Things like this. Some just very, very, very poor editing choices. Some quick cuts that I don't think are there for stylistic choices. They're just kind of like been thrown together, and it just seemed like there's been some sequences kind of missing. I guess it may have been trimmed down for timing, but there are other things that you could trim, to be honest with you, to make it at least feel like a little bit more of a care and attention has gone into the kind of that maybe the edit here. The other thing I want to talk about in regards to its technical side of things is the sound kind of mixing, because the sound's pretty awful on this movie. There's obviously a lot of kind of like Foley effects and kind of ADR here, But some of it is a little distracting. You know, you have kind of like blood dripping. It sounds like it's, you know, being kind of put through a megaphone, things like this. And when they eventually go to the gig, like the music, you have people dancing and kind of like moshing, and the music's so low, it kind of looks really weird. Because obviously then when they're filming, I'm assuming there's no music, and it just looks like that's what's happening. You almost looks like you're watching a making of, because the music, the sound levels are all over the place. There's also some kind of minor issues, things like lighting, just kind of like some general directorial choices that maybe again are just on the kind of the cheaper, low budget side. Looks like it was shot over a short period of time, and there hasn't been a lot of. It's been more kind of shoot from the hip. I also think some of the kind of the dialogue sequences are seem like they're somewhat improvised. Because sometimes you'll just have these conversations kind of like sort of taper off, and sometimes there'll be conversations that maybe just seem like the camera's focusing on them a little bit too long. So it just seemed like it was more of a kind of a shoot from the hip production rather than something that was massively sort of planned out. I was surprised how, although there is quite a high body count here, there's not that much gore, if I'm honest. I mean, there's a hell of a lot of boobs, but not really that much gore, at least. You know, like you'll see on screen, you'll see kind of blood squirting out and things like that, and it is practical. But we don't really see much in the way of kind of like gore kills. It tends to kind of be slightly kind of like in the foreground, or, you know, the camera cuts away, things like that. So I think if you're a gore hound, you may be a little disappointed because of its kind of like low budget schlocky roots. I would have maybe expected it to have a little bit more kind of like gore effects, maybe due to budgetary reasons, maybe they couldn't get the effects right, and kind of stuff like that. I've got to say as well, I think the killer is not particularly interesting to look at. He kind of looks like Jason from Friday the 13th Part 2, to be honest. He doesn't really have his own look, if you know what I mean. And I don't think a pickaxe is a particularly interesting weapon necessarily, and also it doesn't. At one point, he kind of chopped someone's finger off with a pickaxe. How did that happen? You know, it's not really the kind of. It's not a bladed weapon. It's not something that I would think would chop someone's finger off. But anyway, minor point. Overall, I feel for kind of like schlocky slasher fans, this will be the ticket. I think you can enjoy this film if you are a fan of the kind of like maybe like the Hatchet series, things like that. If you only like things like Halloween and the kind of the more kind of you know, higher profile movies, and you're not so keen on the B movie side of stuff, maybe not. But if you are a fan of the kind of the more schlocky side of slasher horror, then this is the one for you. I will give it a 5 out of 10. I don't think it's a particularly great movie, but I feel it will certainly have its audience, and therefore an average mark from me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.